shortly after finishing school, my wife really started to struggle even more with some chronic health issues, dealt with infertility, dealt with a lot of fatigue and a lot of other kind of hormonal type issues. And I had no idea how to help her other than we were taking her to specialists and they didn't know how to help her. And so what wound up happening was, just out of sheer frustration, we were just getting nowhere. I finally just took it upon myself. Again, this wasn't some sort of an ego thing. It was just, I was frustrated. I was like, no one else is helping her. I'm going to see what I can do to learn. And so that began kind of my, first steps into getting trained in functional medicine.
You are listening to the Go Earn Your Salt podcast, brought to you by Salt Electrolytes. On this podcast, your host, Riley Rogers, explores the stories of people who get after it, get things done, and earn their salt. You will hear from high achievers who discuss what makes them tick, how they got to where they are today, and where they're headed tomorrow. Perhaps this podcast will help you go earn your salt. Today, I've got my friend Chad Woolner on here, Dr. Chad. That's what he makes us call him on the jiu-jitsu mats, so he won't even answer to Chad. You got to call him Doctor at the beginning, but I'm only teasing. I invited Chad on here because he's got a pretty fascinating story and a fascinating business dealing with brain health and what goes on there. Part of what we'll talk about today is he and his wife's story dealing with brain sickness and brain illness and what that looks like and how to treat it and all the stuff he's learned over the years. So Chad, I want to welcome you to the show, my friend.
Thank you so much. Excited to be here.
Oh, this is super cool. So give us the intro. Who's Chad?
So by training, I'm a chiropractor. By practice, I am a really, really mediocre jiu-jitsu practitioner. And as you know already,
you're just a 10-year blue belt, dude.
That's okay. Right. That's right. Hey, I didn't quit. So, right. Love doing jiu-jitsu. It's been a lot of fun. What's really funny is, my path in chiropractic and path in jiu-jitsu have a lot to do with each other, because right when I first started my practice back in 2009, is right when I met Professor Keith Owen. And the story of how we met is really kind of funny. I was reaching out to him as just part of some grassroots marketing for my practice. I had basically asked to see if he wanted to do kind of like this joint venture promotion where I was going to have students sell certificates to come into for new patient certificates for a new patient promotion. And I was like, all your students can keep 100% of the proceeds. We just get new patients. And so he's like, he's like, yeah, that's cool, but I don't think we want to do that. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, but you can come speak at my school. And I'm like, even better. And so then that was kind of the whole introduction to him and the school and everybody. That's where I met Trin and Cody and Matt and Dylan, Owen and Dustin and the whole OG crew there. And that was how we got into it. But I've been a chiropractor since 2008. So golly, we're getting close to almost 20 years now. Started into chiropractic as a result of an auto accident injuries that my wife sustained from an auto accident. Had really had very minimal exposure to chiropractic prior to that. And we took my wife to see a chiropractor, had such a positive experience with that, and was just really impressed with the knowledge and the depth and the detail, and most importantly, the results that my wife was able to get. And so I was in school at the time to be a dentist, and we shifted career paths and became a chiropractor. I was like, this is what I want to do the rest of my life. And so became a chiropractor. Shortly after finishing school, my wife really started to struggle even more with some chronic health issues, dealt with infertility, dealt with a lot of fatigue and a lot of other kind of hormonal type issues. And I had no idea how to help her other than we were taking her to specialists and they didn't know how to help her. And so what wound up happening was, just out of sheer frustration, we were just getting nowhere. I finally just took it upon myself. Again, this wasn't some sort of an ego thing. It was just I was frustrated. I was like, no one else is helping her. I'm going to see what I can do to learn. And so that began kind of my, first steps into getting trained in functional medicine. And so I started getting some training, went through a whole training course, finished that training course, started implementing what I was learning with her, and we started making some real significant improvements with her health. And it was just very exciting and eye-opening and new to me. And I was like, I got this brilliant idea of like, hey, we're going to start doing functional medicine at my practice as well as, chiropractic. But I had no sort of systemization of things. I had no sort of plan of implementation. It was just, let's just see what we can do. And it was it was a mess. It was chaos. And so it just never took off, never became anything. But all the while, it was still frustrating for me because I had all these people that I knew I could help. We just didn't have a vehicle to be able to help them. And years later, I met who's now one of my business partners, a real brilliant systems guy. He's a practitioner as well, but that is his powerhouse, is how to systemize things. And so we talked together. We developed a kind of a plan of how we might be able to fix a lot of the problems that were happening with bringing that in. That became a company that we developed about 5 years ago called Simplified Functional Medicine. Since then, we've gone on to help, I think at this point, 500-600 practitioners all across the country who've been through our systems and training, and we help practitioners simplify the delivery of functional medicine to help patients who are struggling with these same sorts of issues. That led into the latest path, which latest has been about 4 years in the making, 3-4 years. We met a brilliant practitioner down in Arizona. His name is Dr. Trevor Berry. He's a board-certified functional neurologist, and he helps all of the most complex cases. He gets people traveling from all over the world coming to see him for all sorts of complex brain-related issues. And one thing led to another, and we began working with him to systemize a lot of the things that he has been doing. And ultimately what has happened, or what has transpired as a result of that, is our latest business and company that we developed called Brain Restore Centers, where we basically help people who are struggling with today's most common brain health issues, neurodegenerative conditions, things like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, cognitive decline, traumatic brain injuries, post-concussive syndrome, balance and vestibular issues, things like post-COVID, long-haul COVID type issues, people who are struggling with things like POTS and other kind of similar, pretty common neurologic issues and disorders. And so it's been really, really exciting to help those people. So
pretty awesome, man. Will you do me a favor? Define functional medicine for me.
Yeah, you're going to get a ton of different answers to that question, but the way that I would describe it is a natural approach to solving chronic health issues. That's the simplest way that I would say it, is a natural strategy for helping people who struggle with chronic health issues. You can get into functional lab testing, which is different than conventional lab testing. Conventional lab testing has these pretty broad reference range windows where it's either basically ruling in or out a pathology, right? You either have, we'll use diabetes as a perfect example, right? Somebody who has, a certain blood marker, you either have diabetes or you don't have diabetes. It's very black and white, versus instead of looking at whether you have or don't have that pathology, we're going to look at, how are things functioning, right? So we're going to narrow in that reference range window. We're going to look a lot more narrow, and we're going to use that. And then we're going to look at kind of lifestyle and symptoms and those different areas. We're not so concerned as to whether or not we can slap the diagnosis or label on it, but instead we're more concerned with improving the overall function of, number one, the person, the human in front of us, but also the various systems and metabolic pathways and things like that. And so it's not just about, diagnosis and medication. It's about actually like improving function wherever that may be in that kind of spectrum, rather than this being this binary on-off switch. Oh, good news, you don't have diabetes, but they still have all the classic symptoms of somebody who is pre-diabetic, who's moving towards that, So Therefore, we don't need to intervene. We don't know, or pay lip service to, you better clean up your diet or else you'll get diabetes. And then you wait and surprise, surprise, where does that go? Eventually diabetes, you know what I mean? So functional medicine is really focused on the emphasis of function, right? So that's how I would.
So you're for this example of diabetes, you're looking at the contributing factors that are leading them down that path more than you are, do they have it or do they not? And then you're educating them on cleaning up that lifestyle or that eating or exercise or whatever happens to be to reverse those effects, right?
Yeah, very much so. And the other thing too that's different about the approach that we take is far too often, I think that well-intentioned practitioners continue to do the classic same thing over and over, expecting a different result. And I would lump many conventional functional medicine practitioners in this same boat. And that is, number one, our biggest contention with conventional functional medicine is, to a large degree, what we have seen is this trading of pharmaceuticals for nutraceuticals. It's the same, to a large extent, same kind of allopathic model, conventional model, except now instead of prescribing metformin, we're going to prescribe berberine. It's better because it's not a medication or whatever, and it's like, great. But the thing is if you're still thinking in that kind of outside in philosophy that we're going to supplement our way out of a lifestyle problem, which the vast majority of these chronic health issues are largely lifestyle mediated and lifestyle driven. And so number one, we're not going to supplement our way out of a chronic health issue. Number two, the way in which we approach addressing those lifestyle issues can't just be, here's a book, here's a brochure, here's a PDF print off guide of what you need to be doing, go do it. And then when the patient doesn't do it, surprise, surprise, well, it's just because they're lazy and they're not motivated enough and that sort of thing. And it's like, no, that's not the answer. You're grossly oversimplifying a far more complex issue that requires a little bit more critical thinking. And so for us, so much of the conversation of how do we involve lifestyle involves first order principles. Number one, how do we start with the low hanging fruit and start building some real momentum to then work towards. That's like I would just simply say, we could talk about this for hours, but like to tackle head on, if a patient comes to us, let's just continue on with metabolic syndrome and whatnot, to tackle an overhauled diet is probably the hardest thing to start with. It's like pushing a boulder up a mountain, right? Why would you start there? Like there's way higher order or whatever you want to call it, easier, lower hanging fruit to start with, to start getting some quick wins first. Let's start with some of those easier. Low-level laser therapy is the starting point for just about all of our patients, regardless of where they come to us from, because it addresses things at the most fundamental level, and that is cellular function and cellular energy. If you look at little exercise for anybody who's listening right now, cool exercise that we do this. I speak to doctors all across the country. This is one of my favorite exercises that we do. Google just about any name a condition right now. We'll do this live right here on the spot. Name a condition right now. Chronic health condition, something that's common. Fatigue. Oh, that's an easy one. Yeah. Google fatigue and mitochondrial dysfunction and see what you'll come up with. It's going to come up with studies, literally, if I type in right now on Google or whatever, ChatGPT, fatigue and mitochondrial dysfunction, it's going to come up with all sorts of published studies, right? The AI overview, mitochondrial dysfunction causes chronic profound fatigue by reducing the production of adenosine triphosphate, right? So there you go. Like, okay, but even something as seemingly not connected, this is a common one that I teach doctors, mitochondrial dysfunction and disc problems. So if you got like a worn out disc or a disc herniation, disc bulge, disc degeneration, Google mitochondrial dysfunction and disc degeneration. What you're going to find are studies showing profoundly over and over and over again. Mitochondrial dysfunction and Alzheimer's disease. Mitochondrial dysfunction and Parkinson's disease. Mitochondrial dysfunction and gut dysbiosis or digestive or ulcerative colitis, or name a condition. And I can almost guarantee you the vast majority of the time, lurking in the background there is going to be some level of mitochondrial dysfunction. So what do I mean by mitochondrial dysfunction? Everybody knows mitochondria from Biology 101. This is the battery or the powerhouse of the cell. Your salt drinks help provide some of the necessary kind of raw ingredients to help with that process in the Krebs cycle, right? We need those vital minerals as part of all the complex reactions involved in that, right? Well, mitochondrial dysfunction is basically the grossly oversimplified way of putting it is when the mitochondria cannot keep up with the demands. So our body is constantly operating at an energetic supply and energetic demand. When we have that perfect balance, we call that homeostasis. When our mitochondria can keep up with the energetic demands, we have normal health and homeostasis and proper function. But all of a sudden, what starts to happen is when the energy demands through chemical, physical, emotional stressors on the body, what starts to happen is the mitochondria start to lose that battle. And that's what's happening. That's what's happening with type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, metabolic dysfunction, all of those, obesity, right? The reason why people get into these weight loss resistance cycles is because the mitochondria do not have the requisite energy to be able to function the way that they need to. Dudes on TRT, right? Why are they getting on TRT? Well, because your body either A, is not producing enough testosterone, or B, it's not responding appropriately to the testosterone that we have. And so all of a sudden you've got enough testosterone that's there, but it's just not responding appropriately because your mitochondria are freaking burnt out and they're not able to produce the energy requisite for cells to be able to engage in cellular communication and or chemical reactions and or the enzymatic processes or the coupling and decoupling of binding proteins and all that stuff. And so getting back to your original question, what would be an example? Low-level laser therapy, because it addresses fundamental issues. It literally recharges the mitochondria. It improves the efficiency by which mitochondria can output ATP, that energy currency. And the body literally doesn't have to do anything. It's just a passive form of energy absorption. So we start there with a vast majority of our patients. Low-level laser therapy, that's one of the fastest, easiest ways to start leveling up people's energy to help. There's a great book by Dr. Chris Palmer a couple years ago wrote called Brain Energy. And there's a quote in there, I'm going to paraphrase badly. People can go and look it up for themselves. But he basically said, the paradox and the irony is that so many of the people that need to engage in the various lifestyle habits that would be responsible to a large degree for helping reverse a lot of these chronic health issues, they physiologically lack the requisite energy to engage in those behaviors, right? So diet and exercise being the two biggies that just about anybody knows, like fundamentally. You don't have to be a functional medicine expert to know people cleaning up their diet and people exercising on a regular basis would make such a huge difference. But the problem is that people get mistakenly blamed as being unmotivated or they just don't want it bad enough or whatever. They get labeled that when in reality, it's not that they're lazy. It's that they physiologically lack the requisite energy because their mitochondria are overburdened and they're not producing the energy that they need. And so that's anyways.
So help this knuckle dragger understand what you're saying, because earlier you mentioned low hanging fruit, right?
Yes.
And why do you start with diet, which is like this really hard to make somebody change a habit there when you can do this? Basically, you're saying this laser therapy it's passive. It's easy for them to do. So it kickstarts the whole process, but doesn't require them overcoming this low energy levels and trying to just will their way into health, right? They just get this, it's almost a free pass right at the beginning, right? It's like,
that's exactly right. Yeah. We call it a catalyst, like it's an energy catalyst. So we start that, but we don't end there, right? It's not that the laser is going to magically solve your dietary problems for you or your lack of exercise. But what it will do is it'll give us a window of opportunity. And that window of opportunity is typically seen and felt in, oh man, I feel more mental clarity. Oh man, I feel less joint pain. Oh man, I feel a little bit more motivated to be able to engage. And it's at that point in time where when they do start to now all of a sudden have this resurgence of physiologic energy that's been donated via photons, right, via light energy, we can then start to coach them through the process of how do we begin getting, and even then when we do that, there's an order of magnitude by which we go about that process. Largely, if you read books like James Clear's Atomic Habits, right? That's a classic book. Just about everybody in the world has read it at this point in time. Everybody's familiar with it, right? You start with the small, it's the aggregation of the small nominal gains, right? So for us, so much of what we teach in our functional medicine program and our brain programs is getting people to just tweak just ever so slightly their morning and evening routines. Getting their biological rhythms reset is one of the most profoundly powerful ways to set someone up for success in all other habits that these two pillars literally bleed into everything else throughout your life. If you can kind of master and develop a really healthy morning and evening routine, mentally, physiologically, so many other things spring from those two pillars in that process. And so,
give me an example. What's a healthy morning routine?
Immediate sunlight exposure. Dr. Huberman has been preaching this on his podcast adamantly for the past probably 2-3 years plus, right? Getting immediate sunlight in the eyes is one of the fastest, easiest ways to start in training your circadian rhythm, particularly and specifically cortisol. The goal in the morning is to try and see if you can get cortisol to get as high as it possibly can, because then what it does is it sets the stage for the normal kind of tapering off that cortisol does throughout the day. The normal rhythm, the normal kind of master hormone that primes your circadian rhythm, you can almost think about it as two opposing forces. You have cortisol, which ebbs and flows in that it's typically at its highest peak in a normal healthy person at about 6 to 8 a.m., somewhere in that window there. And then it slowly starts to taper down and reaches its lowest kind of valley or bottoms out at about 10 p.m.-ish. And then it recycles through the night and kind of ebbs back up so that again, that's the kind of normal
flow. What does cortisol
flow.
do?
What doesn't it do? Cortisol does a lot of stuff. So cortisol is going to be involved in normal hormone signaling. It's going to be involved in blood sugar regulation. It's going to be involved in energy. Most people, cortisol has gotten a bad rap over the years, right? It's most people,
They call it the stress hormone, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah, everybody thinks that cortisol is bad. The answer to all your problems is you have to lower your cortisol. Not necessarily. And that's one of the areas where a lot of people go wrong completely, is somebody who's already struggling with cortisol rhythm imbalances. The last thing in the world for many of these people that they need to do is suppress cortisol. And not only that, but that's too simplistic thinking. It's too binary. Like most people think of cortisol suppression or elevation in this binary. It's not. It's a dynamic rhythmic hormone. And so really we're not talking about suppressing or elevating cortisol for the sake of suppressing or elevating it. Think of it more dynamically throughout the day. What we have to do is shift the rhythm so that it follows a normal ebb and flow like it should. It should start in the morning and then taper off in the evening. But then on the opposite side of that, or paradoxically, adenosine should slowly, gradually elevate through the day. So adenosine should start, because adenosine is what drives sleep. That's your sleep driver, is by the end. And so what caffeine does, and here's a plug for salt drinks instead of caffeine, right? Caffeine, it suppresses that buildup of adenosine. And so what you're doing essentially is you're artificially shunting or blunting that adenosine, allowing it to build up. And so this is why you don't want to take caffeine late in the day, because that's going to interfere with adenosine's ability to kind of create that. It's like think of it like a pressure cooker. Over time, it's building until it finally reaches that point of, okay, I'm ready to fall asleep now. And then melatonin kicks in because of light and dark. And then melatonin is what's going to trigger, kind of the induction or the starting point of the sleep. That's time to start the starting gun. And so, but getting back to kind of that whole rhythm there is, if we can reestablish morning evening routines, that can really, to a large degree, just through your own behavior, start to shift hormonal rhythms and govern something is foundational. And that's the thing, is if you can get that window right, that circadian rhythm window, so many downstream effects come from that, right? When you look at the chemical pathway, and we go over this with patients all the time. If you map it out, and this is grossly oversimplified, we're missing tons of little sub steps and everything like that. But in essence, you get the gist. The master kind of key hormone is known as pregnenolone. Pregnenolone gets converted into DHEA, which then further gets broken down into estrogen and testosterone. On the other side of it, it gets converted to progesterone, which is the direct precursor to cortisol. And so you think about that. If we can start to master those hormonal rhythms, those daily circadian rhythms, so many other hormones, all the other kind of key hormones feed into that or feed from that one way or another. And so you master that helps. And the issue for us is we start here because so often what happens is people will get on various forms and methods and protocols of hormone replacement therapy. And this isn't to knock or say that there isn't its place for that hormone replacement. My wife does hormone replacement therapy, but the issue is that if you're not addressing these fundamental upstream issues of like your normal circadian rhythm and hormonal rhythm, and you start with the hormone replacement therapy and you still haven't addressed those fundamental issues, you're not going to get the same types of results, or you're still going to have problems upstream of that, right? So start with the foundational circadian rhythm, and then you can taper in or layer in the hormone replacement stuff as well. But you, no doubt that circadian rhythm plays a role for women in terms of their normal monthly cycle and normal monthly rhythm as well. So anyways,
this so this area of medicine you're talking about, man, somewhat it's trending, right? With especially kind of the more crunchy crowd, right? We want to stick in the more natural medicine. But what I've seen a lot that happens is, how to articulate it right. There's almost some woo-woo goes on in that world where it seems like whether it be the practitioner or the lack of understanding of the patient, they tend to go down these kind of weird rabbit holes that seem to just have no. You mentioned systematic earlier, right? You got involved with this guy who was like a systems genius, and you mentioned it in your book too. To systemize that and really create something that's repeatable is what I see lacking in that world, right? And so I want you to go into this a little bit on what you guys have done in the systemizing that, so there's repeatable progress in people's lives. So what I'm getting at, Chad, is the how to really test and diagnose things, so it's not just this vague, almost aimless, like, well, we're going to try this and try this and try this. It reminds me of an auto mechanic who just goes, well, it says it's an electrical code, so we're just going to start replacing parts. Well, that's not a way you do it. That's a way to cost a customer a lot of money and get nowhere, right?
Yeah.
So how do you go about that?
I love this question because literally we were just talking about this the other day. Typically and conventionally, traditionally, whatever you want to call it, there's kind of these two worlds that kind of push on each other a little bit. There's the conventional Western medicine world and model, and you've got even in there, you've got a little bit of a spectrum there. You've got your diehards where they're extreme on one end, and then you've got the other end of that spectrum in the alternative crowd, chiropractors probably being some of the biggest voices in that realm. And again, you've got a spectrum, and you've got these extreme diehards on one end where natural everything, chiropractic fixes everything. You never have to see a medical doctor. In fact, don't ever see a medical doctor for any reason whatsoever. And if we can kind of eliminate those two voices on the two extremes, right, that would be fantastic for everybody in the middle. But the thing I would say
about crystals and magic, dude. That's in there somewhere.
Yeah,
too, right?
it is exactly on the extreme ends there. But and again, it's not just chiropractors. But the thing I would say is this: the one of the biggest frustrations, because it's not an easy answer, because there's good and bad to it. And I've wrestled with this for many, many years, is the lack of standardization in chiropractic, and we'll just say alternative medicine in general compared to medicine. And there are pros and cons to that, right? On both sides. The massive standardization that you have in conventional Western medicine, there are pros and cons to that. The cons of high standardization in medicine is that, to a large degree, once a patient doesn't fit inside of that algorithm, it's like the conventional, the conundrum is, well, we've done everything we can, so there's no helping you, scratch the doctors and their teams scratch their heads. And so that's really where, to a large extent, where alternative medicine can shine to a large degree, is they're willing to think outside the box and entertain some of these non-conventional ways of doing things, which oftentimes helps solve a lot of problems for patients. It comes at a price, though, and the price on the kind of the opposite side of that coin, or the flip side of that, is that lack of standardization can create a very difficult time for people to find solutions and answers. Meaning, I've got an issue in my neck, let's just say, and I go to chiropractor Joe here, and I ask him, what is your treatment recommendation? He gives me a treatment plan. And then I go to the chiropractor down the street, Dr. Jeff, he gives me a completely different strategy and plan, and then go to the other, 10 different chiropractors, 10 different plans for the same problem. And I'm like, really, and I'm being a little bit facetious. It's not that bad, but you can have that kind of variance. And so we were talking with part of our, for our company, Brain Restore Centers, we have a medical advisory board, and one of our medical advisors, a brilliant neurosurgeon, her name is Dr. Webb, Dr. Sharon Webb, out of South Carolina. And she was saying that's one of the things that she, number one, as a doctor, as a neurosurgeon, you can imagine, they live and die by protocols, because you're talking about life and death in many instances, and so they need standardization, and standardization, love it or hate it, that's the only way that you can truly arrive in any sort of a scientific understanding of anything. You have to have a system that's replicatable to some degree, so that you can measure pre and post and have objective outcomes to determine, does this intervention or do these interventions work? And so, that being said, that's one of the things that we've really kind of worked hard on with our protocols for Brain Restore Centers is, number one, the interventions and the tools that we use individually have a lot of research to support them, gold standard research, multi-site, double-blind, placebo-controlled studies, just lots and lots of good, high-level peer-reviewed literature to support them. But the way in which we have systemized and integrated things does not yet have a lot of research to support this quote-unquote methodology. But what we are doing is we're being very meticulous about making sure that we are tracking and aggregating objective data, so that we can have sufficient scientific evidence to support what we're doing. And all along the way further, one of the things that's unique about our program is we're building it in a fairly structured way, so that it's not this kind of wild, wild west. We've got about 25 clinics across the country. We're not leaving it up to them to just say, okay, here's this kind of suite of tools, guys. Use them however you want to use them. Just go for it. There's very much a very specific system and process for the protocols. This is what happens when a patient comes through your doors. This is how we evaluate the patient. This is how we interpret. This is how we then make the recommendations. This is how we determine what type of a plan we do for them, what length of that plan is. And this is literally step by step how we incorporate these tools and interventions. First, step one, we do this. And again, not surprising given our initial start, we start with low-level laser therapy. That's where we start, and we do it this way, and this is the protocol. And so very much a systems-based approach, because if we're going to be tracking data, it has to be that way. We can't have all these confounding variables all over the place, because that's literally the antithesis of science, right? Science is all about trying to limit as many variables as we can so that we can have the clearest understanding and start to arrive at, a good understanding, a solid understanding of, is what we're doing working? Is it helping? So I hope that answers the question.
I think it does. Because one of the things I think I hear you saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that you're tracking all the data because you've gone into this with kind of an educated, I don't want to call it a guess, but there's some education there, but you're also pioneering something, right? And so you're when you're the first to the party in anything, there is some guesswork that goes on.
Sure.
But if you track all the data over time, now you can start to take that data and go, okay, this is what we originally thought, but let's tweak it here because the data says so. And then over time, you really get to develop these systems that then become robust again over time. Because again, you're pioneering this thing, man.
Yeah. And I think that's fair to say, because of the, and we're willing to kind of stick our necks out there in this process in terms of the claims we're making, because we know that individually, when you separate out the different tools that we're using, take, for instance, low-level laser therapy, for instance, over 13,000, at this point, 13,000 peer-reviewed studies showing that low-level laser therapy, or the term that a lot of people will use in the science world is photobiomodulation, is it's a mouthful. It's an incredibly effective tool, and they're showing more and more research supporting it for a wide range of different issues. So that tool, right? Plenty of research beyond dispute. We know that this works. We know that it's an effective tool. This tool over here, neurofeedback. We use neurofeedback, right? We know neurofeedback has a growing body of research supporting it, saying it's a very effective tool. Nutrition, big part of it. Like, duh. The most evidence-based thing for brain health is exercise and nutrition, right? So we're incorporating that in there. And so it's one of those things where it's like, it's very obvious, it's self-evident that what happens is, when we integrate these things together, individually, any one of them is going to do a really, really good job. But what we're asking is, but how much better can we do when we start to integrate things together in a meaningful way, in a sequenced, systematic way? And the term that we continue to use over and over again, and I don't want it to get lost as a clever soundbite, is it's sequential, it's systematic, and it's synergistic. It's this whole, when we do things in the right order, when we do it in a systemized fashion, and when we do them together, I believe what the research will show is it will get a better outcome. How much better? Not sure yet, but a better outcome than using one individual modality on its own. And that's the thing that you're going to find lots of these kind of maverick clinics out there that are doing their thing, their shtick. We are the neurofeedback clinic. We are the laser clinic. We are this tool clinic. We are the nutrition, the functional medicine clinic. We do, and what Brain Restore Centers is doing, and what's unique and special about what we're doing is we're the first to, in any sort of a meaningful way, systemize a far more integrated and complete solution, as opposed to just trying to hang our hat on one individual modality or tool.
Yeah. When we were developing the electrolyte formula for Salt, right?
Yeah.
I would keep seeing these marketing ploys by other companies in the supplement space, And one of the things that you see a lot is where they go, the perfect blend of blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Right. And people would ask me all the time, like, do you have an optimal blend of electrolytes in there? And I was like, I don't know. I might for this exact moment in your life, but tomorrow your electrolyte balance in your body might be different. So my formula may not be perfect for tomorrow. And so part of my research in that said, with the things we put in our drink, as long as we had enough of them, they were all components that your body would just slough off the rest. So if we could fill all the tanks of those minerals, then it was going to be enough. Now, is it the perfect balance? No. And so we never claim that in our literature, right?
Yeah.
It's not the perfect balance. We don't know what the perfect balance is. it's moment to moment that changes, right? And so it's a
Sure.
moving target that you cannot, there's no methodology to track down what the perfect balance of that is.
Right.
And I hear
Right.
you saying some of the same thing there where you're going, we have to use different modalities because every person's situation is different. Now we can start here, and this low level light therapy you're talking about, or laser therapy you're talking about, is a good starting point, and there's not a consequence to it. There's no real downside to it. So it has positive effects, but not a lot of negative. And again, correct me if I'm hearing you're totally wrong, but it's a great place to start. But then there's more work to do, right? All right, you sweaty buggers. That liquid dripping off your forehead and down your back contains minerals that are critical for high performance. If you don't put those minerals back, you're not going to perform well. This is where Salt Electrolytes comes in. Salt contains 6 electrolyte minerals plus a touch of iodine to help you replenish after a hard workout. Salt is the only electrolyte supplement to pair every mineral with its counterpart, giving you the most robust mineral profile on the market, period. Head over to goearnyoursalt.com today to get some for yourself. Use the code GOEARNYOURSALT to get 15% off your first order. And now, my friends, go earn your salt.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, low level laser therapy, exactly what you said. Probably one of, if not the safest tools, could literally be used. There's been, I don't know how many millions of low level. Well, and let me give one caveat. That depends on the laser you're using and how you're defining, right? How you're defining low level laser, because there are a lot of different companies out there that claim to be lasers that aren't true lasers. The company
Timu versions, that's what you're saying.
Yeah, that's exactly right though, and that's the whole point. Is like I'm not going to say that that's safe. We don't know, The company that we work with is a company that has a very, very long history and well established, not only safety record but effectiveness record. They are the undisputed champions when it comes to low level laser therapy research. In the world of true low level laser therapy, there has only been a total of 24, maybe 25. It changes every year. FDA clearances that have ever been granted. This company, Erconia, they have 22 out of the 25, 24, 25. They're the ones doing all the research. They're the ones who are testing and retesting and checking and rechecking. And so, yeah, incredibly safe products. What the leading, most cutting edge research clearly shows, despite what some laser companies claim and say, this is the simplest way to determine if a laser company is legit and if they actually have their finger on the pulse of what research says. If they equate power to results, they have no idea what they're talking about. They just don't. A lot of these
talking power like wattages and that kind of
exactly,
that
yeah,
kind of speak.
That's exactly right. So a lot of these kind of what they call class 4 laser companies, who they like to refer to themselves as a low level laser. That's not a true low level laser. Class 4 lasers that emit heat. They'll claim that their lasers are more effective because there is a higher degree of penetration that can be achieved because of how much power they're putting in. That is not what the research shows at all. What the research shows is that the higher the amount of power you put into the laser, the less efficient that laser is at stimulating the mitochondria. And that lack of efficiency comes about and I'm no physicist, so I'm not going to try and claim to explain this in some super deep way, but that lack of efficiency comes in the form of heat. That heat is a representation of a loss of energetic potential. What you're doing is you're essentially heating up water in your tissues, and that water represents where that energy has now gone. It has dissipated essentially into the form of heat. What we want in a true low-level laser is we want high energy, not high power. We want low power, high energy. There's a difference between power and energy. And energy, that energetic potential, gets maximized when the power is low. And when we say low, let me put some numbers behind that so people can kind of at least wrap their head around it to some degree. A lot of these class 4 laser companies, they typically start at about 20 watts, maybe a little lower, but typically the ones that really tout their power, 20, 30, 40, 50, as many as 60 watts. The Erconia lasers range anywhere between 7 to 17 milliwatts. So massive difference in power output. And Erconia has been like, yeah, they've been shouting this from like the rooftops for the longest time. They're like, they get treated by some of these other laser companies as though like, well, your lasers, they're not good enough because they don't have power. And Erconia is like, look, if we want to produce, we know how to produce lasers that can put out a high power output. We would totally do that if that's where the research was telling us it needed to go. But that's not what the research is showing us. The research is undeniably showing that you are not, and here's the difference why. Because there's in general, there's two different effects that lasers can have, low-level lasers can have on the body. You can either induce what they call a photothermal effect, where basically light is changing temperature or heat, emitting heat. That's what we just talked about that. The predominant effect that it's going to have on the body is a photothermal effect. What Erconia lasers do, what true low-level lasers do, is they create a photochemical effect. What we're doing is we're using light to change the body's biochemistry. That's what we're doing. And that's where the real magic starts to happen with these lasers is you're going to use specific wavelengths of light that contain inherent in that wavelength. So if you look at the Roy G. Biv, the whole visible light spectrum, within that visible light spectrum, inherently contained with the specific wavelength are specific energies. Right? Highest energy being violet, or when you start to, and what we're looking for is we're looking for the highest level of energy without damaging tissue, because you can get past that sweet spot and all of a sudden you're going to start getting ionizing radiation to the point where it's going to damage tissue and damage DNA. We clearly don't want that, because then all of a sudden that's no longer therapeutic. That's detrimental, right? We're looking for those little windows.
Patients, yeah.
That's exactly right. What we're looking for is they call it a hormetic window or hormetic threshold, where we're looking for it needs to be able to have enough energy to induce the chemical changes or shifts, right? And this happens when you look at the science, it's wild. It happens at an atomic level, because essentially what you're doing is if you could, and again, for all the light physicists out there who are listening, because I know there's a ton of them, they're going to cringe. They're going to cringe when they hear my explanation of it. But the way I understand it is the wavelengths inside of that wavelength, you have those wavelengths are made up of photons, right? Photons are forms of light energy. Inside of those photons, if you were to kind of take the little magic school bus and go as small as you can, the smallest form of energy is what's called an electron volt. Those photons are made up of electron volts. Those electron volt, you're literally throwing, if you're shining a therapeutic laser at somebody, you're literally throwing over a quadrillion, that's an actual word or actual number, quadrillion photons that contain in the electron volts. And those electron volts, you have to have a certain number of electron volts to be able to induce the atomic changes within the cellular structures. And so the threshold is you have to have, in order to induce that kind of change or shift in electron valence shell disbursement or changes or shifts or whatever, you have to have at least 1.7 or 1.8 electron volts. And if it doesn't have that, and that's inherently connected or directly connected to the wavelength itself. If it doesn't hit that wavelength, you don't have enough electron volts. If you don't have enough electron volts, you can't shift or change valence of the electrons at the atomic level, thereby inducing the shifts and the changes energetically to be able to induce these photochemical effects that we need to affect within the mitochondria and the electron transport chain and all that fun stuff. And so violet has the highest energy. It contains 405 nanometers, contains, I think it's like 3.2 electron volts. Green is the next highest. That's 520 nanometers, has 2.7, 2.4, somewhere in there, electron volts. And then red is the lowest, 635, has 1.8 electron volts. So just enough to be able to create those changes. And so that's where, boy, I'm going down to these different rabbit holes, but yeah, that's what makes lasers so special, is because these lasers in particular is because they're incredibly effective, but also just as important, incredibly safe. You can't harm somebody with these lasers. So
It's interesting to me, man, because that it sounds like there's a lot of words there that I'm trying to sort out. I'm having to define them in my head and think really hard as you're talking,
Yeah,
because
yeah, yeah.
you went full nerd there for a little bit, but
Yeah, I know. I
we're
get it. Yeah.
but it is interesting to me because finding that balance of, they always just say with medications, right? More isn't
Yep.
necessarily better,
Totally.
right? You can
Yeah.
you can have a safe dose and it's a comfortable dose, and you may feel like, well, it helped a little bit, so maybe if I take twice as much, I'll feel even better,
Yeah,
and then
yeah,
you're
yeah.
dead. So
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
it's,
Minimum effective dose. That's what we're talking about. Yep. That minimum effective dose. That's exactly right. So,
yeah. Um, Talk about this, dude. So I know the brain health subject came to you after some life experiences, right? You started to get really interested in that after some life experiences. And one of those was your wife and her battle with cancer.
yep.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah. My wife has obviously from the beginning has dealt with a whole host of chronic health issues. Eventually, we came to find out she had thyroid cancer. And that was right. Yeah, that was like right at the time that I was starting in jujitsu with you guys. So you guys were probably right alongside us for that journey. She had a total thyroidectomy, did some radiation therapy, and what then happened was this kind of ongoing hormonal battle of trying to find that right balance. And along the way, she started dealing with some really, really bad sleep issues, insomnia, and we did everything. You know, we were, and it was very discouraging for me, both from the standpoint of clearly loving my wife and wanting to help her, but also functional medicine practitioner, like just unable to help her. And it got so bad that finally we broke down, and she started taking Ambien, and
Mm.
and she did that for about a year, 2 years, and it became less and less effective, and so she increased her dosing just a little bit, and and she knew automatically, like, this is not where we want to go, because I can already see the writing on the wall. This is not how I want to live the rest of my life, is constantly having to increase. And she just knew it was not going to be good. She started doing her own research. We just did not realize at the time just how harmful Ambien is. It's a scary drug.
I've heard horror stories about that stuff.
Yeah,
Man.
it's nasty stuff. And so she made the mistake. We made the mistake. She stopped cold turkey. That's not what you do. If you've been on Ambien for any length of time, you need to taper off. She didn't. And then that basically just made a bad problem worse. And so then that really began kind of a multi-year battle with insomnia that really, really royally messed her brain up in a very, very bad way. And that created a whole lot of additional problems that, that's the bad side of it. The good side of it is that it caused me to start doing a lot of research and reflection. Ultimately, that's to a large degree, it was the combination of our functional medicine program, our integration with low-level laser therapy, and Amber's sleep issues that kind of led me to connect with Dr. Trevor Berry down in Arizona, and that's when our kind of paths kind of crossed together. And he has dealt with these types of issues and stuff, and patients who struggle with similar issues and different issues and the whole gamut. And ultimately, it was this plus a combination of other different circumstances and stories that kind of the planets aligned the right way, and we were able to kind of begin this journey together and start this process. Because his problem that he had, and I talk about this in the book, is he is this brilliant probably one of the top most brilliant practitioners in the world with regard to neurology and brain health. I mean, just you would be very hard pressed to find somebody as brilliant as this guy. I mean, he is truly gifted, amazing. But his problem is he's only one person. Like you know. So how do you help take that information at scale, and there's no real way to do that. And that was the problem and frustration he kept having. Was he would go and he would lecture all over the world, and practitioners would come to him after his lectures and be like, "You're amazing, I want to do what you do." And he's like, "No, you don't." And they're like, "No, I do." And he's like, "No, it's taken me literally over nearly 3 decades to learn what I've learned. I don't have any real system for what I do. I just do what I do because I've done it so long, and I'm good at what I do." And it was this frustration of him. He wants to help practitioners, but he just didn't have a vehicle for doing that. There was no practical, pragmatic way of him extracting what's up here and putting it out into other people's heads, short of, okay, you want to do what I do, clear off your schedule for the next 20 years and let's begin. That's not a practical answer either. And so it was the kind of combination of my frustrations, his frustrations. Dr. Wells, he's our COO of the company. He was in a really bad car accident himself, fractured his neck, had a fusion, had suffered concussion and post-concussive symptoms and issues. His son started developing neurological tics after the car accident. He was on his own kind of journey that led him to Dr. Barry as well. Dr. Green, our CEO, his father-in-law was not that long ago diagnosed with a really aggressive form of dementia and has struggled with that. And that led Jason on his own journey of frustration. And so these kind of worlds kind of came together in a unique way where we all kind of recognized, look, I don't care who you are, anybody who's listening to this podcast right now, I guarantee you, your life in one way or another is directly impacted because of a brain health issue, either your own or a loved one, guaranteed. Everybody. These are such ubiquity. It is the epidemic of our day and age. And so our whole reason for creating Brain Restore Centers is we don't just want to make a qualitative difference in people's lives, like the 1 or 2 or small handful of people. We want to make a massive quantitative difference. And the only way that we believe that is going to happen is through a systems-driven approach, meaning we have to mobilize and empower a much, much higher number of practitioners. We have to mobilize an army of practitioners who have the tools and the systems and the resources that don't require them to take 3 decades to learn, that they can be up and running very, very fast and start delivering good results and outcomes for people as quickly as possible. And that's what we've done.
It's interesting because you're kind of bringing that back around to that thing you said much earlier about starting diet, which is the most difficult thing to change when you have this super inexpensive, super effective, very easy to do light therapy, laser light therapy, right? Yeah. And the same thing is what you're saying here is you're taking this subject matter that takes 3 decades to learn, but is there a way now to condense that down into maybe a couple year period? Because that's just too big of a bridge to gap, right? It's
what we're doing
30 years. Most people don't have it.
That's exactly. Well, and not only that, but this is the problem and the dilemma that we've run into that we try and explain to practitioners and the lay public alike. So this is what happens far too often. The conventional approach to teaching practitioners how to engage in meaningful neurology is they get excited about neurology. They go and they start training in neurology, but it's all academic training. And so what happens is they train, there's no real world application. And so they don't get any real world experience. They don't develop any sort of clinical confidence or competence because it's all theoretical in the realm of academia, textbooks and studies and presentations and notes and everything like that. And if there is any sort of application that does take place in by chance, it's not at any sort of meaningful level. It's 1 or 2 people that they're kind of like messing around with. I think I'm learning that. And so then what happens is you're back to square one. The practitioner has had no real impact. And so then they go back and their answer to it is, okay, I just got to learn more. So it's this cycle of endlessly looping. And you have so many of these brilliant practitioners who have all of this stuff floating around up here, but it's never actually getting implemented or applied in the real world. And what we're doing that's massively different paradoxically, and it almost to some people would sound and seem and be perceived as almost reckless, but it's not, and I'll explain why. We believe the fastest way to learn is to do it. So what we're going to do is we're going to get you in the trenches doing it as quickly as humanly possible, as safely as possible. And so what makes this different and what makes this doable is that the things that we're teaching you how to do are inherently safe and inherently effective right out the box, meaning lasers. Perfect example. You shine lasers on somebody. There is almost virtually no way that you can harm somebody with these lasers, barring you dropping a laser on their head, right? There's no way that you're going to harm these people. And so we teach you how to start helping people by helping people. We get you in the trenches, we roll up the sleeves and we say, okay, here is the protocol, here is the system. You're going to start doing it. And as you're doing it, the more that you get these reps in the real world, you may not have all of the right academic terminology for every condition, every, thing. But the one thing you do have is experience in how to help people. I don't claim to be a neurologist. I tell patients that. I can't tell you how many times I tell that to patients on a daily basis. I'm not a neurologist. I don't play one on TV. But I can tell you that I know how to help people who are dealing with these issues because I do it and I've seen it and we know the process.
It's interesting, man, because you're saying you basically went back to the age-old apprenticeship program, right? You
That's
started
exactly
working
right.
somebody through it with hands-on, and rather than this theoretical university kind of modern day way of learning.
Well, and that's the thing. It's funny about it is I think I'm not a medical doctor, so I can't say, but I think I'm fairly confident that most medical doctors you would ask, they would say that most of their real learning came through their residencies, not from the 4 years of, academic learning. And not to say that
I hear that in every subject. Every subject. Engineers say that.
Yeah.
Attorneys say that.
It's not to say that
Jiu-jitsu
there's
practitioners.
Yeah. Well, that's funny you say that, right? Because I always tell the story, I bought back in the day before I started with Keith and you guys in jiu-jitsu, I bought the old Hoyler Gracie Kid Peligro jiu-jitsu book. Remember that one? One of the first jiu-jitsu.
I don't, but yeah.
One of the first jiu-jitsu textbooks. I bought it and I read all the diagrams, and in my mind academically I'm like, yeah, armbar, triangle. I get this. Guard pass, shrimp. I know how to do that. And in my mind, and then I go and I actually train and get on the mats and I'm like, no, I don't know how to do, literally, I didn't know how to do anything. And it was like, and that just goes to show you the power of like doing versus theoretical thinking or understanding or whatever. It's like real learning and real understanding comes through the doing. And that's our whole big contention with this whole process is we're getting practitioners comfortable with, and it's a little scary at the beginning because you're going to get these practitioners get these cases that come through their door. We still do too. And it's not like I'm like, oh yeah, I can, I'm always like, holy cow, like what do we do? But it doesn't stop us or prevent us from at least starting and attempting to try and help these people. And so that's I would say the beauty of what we have developed here is a very safe and very effective system by which practitioners can start helping people at a much faster rate. And that's exactly what is necessary, we believe, if we're going to start actually making some sort of a quantitative difference in the brain health epidemic that's out there. Is that I just can't say, and if there's a better way that somebody else has a reasonable, practical, realistic way, I'm all ears for it. But I just don't see at this rate, because we've seen pharmaceutical era of brain related issues, and we'll relegate this to cognitive decline and post-concussive stuff. Pharmaceutical industry has come up short time and time again. There is no meaningful medication that has been developed, nor do I think that there ever will be in our lifetime, developed for Alzheimer's or Parkinson's or anything like that. No matter how much they think, no matter how hard they try, they continue to fall short time and time again. There's just not, and I think primarily why is because this is the brain is a multimodal system. It requires a multitude of different inputs from different angles and different ways and different mediums. And the pharmaceutical is just one route of delivery and one medium. And so and not only that, but it's one of the least efficient mediums for delivering any sort of, the whole, biochemical exchange is not nearly as efficient as the photochemical exchange. Photochemical exchange is way more efficient, energetically speaking. Way less energy from the body is required to get that energy. So many of the therapies that we do are these just low-hanging fruit, easy passive consumption strategies, low-level laser therapy, various forms of oxygen therapy, mild hyperbaric therapy, right? Super easy, way more efficient than pharmaceuticals or even nutraceuticals, right? And so, anyways.
Will you do me a favor here and define brain health's a wide spectrum of stuff, right? So
Yeah.
defining kind of what brain health that we're talking about, because the problem with it is it's invisible.
Yeah.
You can't see it. You look at someone who's really struggling with some, brain stuff, and you can't, again, it's not visible. You can't see it. They look just like a normal person.
Yeah.
But it could be, you mentioned concussions, you mentioned things like insomnia, you mentioned all these symptoms of it. Well, concussions would be a cause, I guess, but the define it, kind of wrap it up. So what when you say brain health,
Yep.
What are you talking about?
Great question. And we'll put this in objective terms. What we've done, that again is very, very unique and proprietary and really exciting for us, is we have developed what's called a brain score. We call it our Brain Restore score or our Brain Health score. This is an aggregate of some of the best, most evidence-based, objective markers that measure cognitive and or physical function. And so when we look at brain health, the way we look at it is we do a series of different objective evaluations or tests that allow us to get a window into how well the brain is functioning. One of those tests that is pretty widely accepted by just about all conventional practitioners out there is what's called the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. It's a standardized test that's administered that gives a baseline score. Total score is out of 30. Anybody that scores 26 or higher on the Montreal Cognitive Assessment has normal cognitive function. A score of 25 or lower would indicate some degree of cognitive impairment. So like 25, I think it's like scores from like 18 to 25 would be considered mild cognitive impairment. 17 or lower, you start getting into more of the moderate and or severe levels of cognitive impairment. So we look at that objective measure, and that's going to look at things like memory recall, speech, pattern recognition, math, things like that. So we administer that test as one of the batteries of tests we do. We do what's called a QEEG, which is looking at electrical function of the brain. It's a real-time window into how your brain is functioning. Look at areas that are either overactive, underactive, imbalanced, et cetera, et cetera. So we can look at that, and that can give us a window into how your brain is actually functioning in real time versus compared to, say, your conventional MRI, CTs. Those are going to look at structure of the brain. Those are going to be great for and essential for if you're suspecting some sort of physical damage or change to the structure or tissue. Strokes, bleeds, tumors, infections, things like that. That's where CT, but they're not going to tell you what's actually functionally happening with the brain. So that's where QEEG comes in. We look at what's called computerized dynamic posturography or digital balance testing. One of the most sensitive tests out there for detecting early on impairment with the brain and body in terms of how well the brain is communicating with the body, how well the body is communicating with the brain. It's not going to be a specific test, meaning you're not going to put somebody on there and say, you have Alzheimer's, or you have Parkinson's, or whatever. But it will much, much earlier than a lot of other tests be able to earlier detect mild shifts in neurologic function. And so digital balance assessment. And then we look at We do a full bedside neurologic evaluation, so head to toe. We do cranial nerve assessment. We do sensory and peripheral and motor function of the nervous system, as well as a couple other different specialty tests. We look at and assess the cerebellum, balance, coordination,
So
things like that.
what do those tests look like? And again, lots of words that are too big for this knuckle dragger to understand. But what did those tests look like? You said cranial. What'd you call it?
Cranial nerve assessment. These are going to be a lot of the nerves. They call them cranial nerves because they are largely based in the skull and in the head, right? So these are going to be things that look at like simple things like smiling and frowning. That's going to be controlled by your facial nerve. We'll use a really practical one. Olfactory. Your first cranial nerve is your olfactory. That's your sense of smell. Early changes in smell is one of the earliest, most sensitive indicators of neurodegenerative changes in the brain. So if somebody's like, my sense of smell is off, or that seems weird, that's not a trivial thing. And so we test that. That's a really simple, but yet very profoundly powerful window into, hey, this person could be. And so when you say, I've had memory issues, then all of a sudden you detect I can't identify a common scent, or I'm having things are smelling weird. That's an early indicator. So that's a cranial nerve. And so
I remember that during COVID, right? When we all lost our sense of taste and smell.
Yeah.
Or things that normally kind of smelled pleasant to us all of a sudden stunk. And
yeah,
my daughter for a year after she had COVID said that coffee smelled like baby poop to her. It was just a different scent. It was like like they changed places in her head. It was very strange.
Yeah. But yeah, so basically the punchline is what we're doing is we're administering a battery of different tests to look at from multiple angles how the brain is functioning in different ways. So we're looking at memory, we're looking at balance and stability, we're looking at coordination, we're looking at strength. We're looking at sensory, different types of sensation, light touch, sharp sensation, things like that. And then we do the last piece of the overall puzzle is what we call a symptom index, where it's a questionnaire, but it's based on kind of day-to-day function. So we're going to ask them questions about how well they do with their perceived their perception of their world, right? How do you perceive you're doing with your memory? How do you do with movement and coordination? How do you do with all these things? And so then what we do is we take all of that data that we've gathered, we aggregate it together, and we put it into what we call a score. We have a scoring system, and that score represents, getting back to your original question, what is brain health? What are we talking about? We're talking about the ability to utilize your brain consciously and even subconsciously. How is your brain doing with regard to its place in perception of the world around us, right? Are you able to recall words? Are you able to remember things? Are you able to solve simple math problems? Are you able to stand and walk and balance without interference or problems or significant worry? Fall risk is probably it's the number one cause of preventable death in the elderly is balance and fall risks, right? So these are not little trivial things we're looking at here. These are significant things. And so brain health is, like you said, it is broad, but it really could be summed up into how well is your brain functioning across all of these kind of different day-to-day domains. So
you're in these tests, do you ever involve the people around the patient? And what I mean by that is if you're dealing with something like dementia or Alzheimer's type symptoms, or something much less severe, perhaps, where someone's just having, we call them brain farts, right? Where we're just off.
Yeah.
And not always, I think, can the person tell. You know, I've had seasons where like I feel fine, but my wife's going, dude, you're kind of off. So do you involve people around them?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's huge. In fact, that's one of our requirements in our clinic is that we will not present a plan to a patient unless their spouse is there or significant other is there. And we do this for kind of two practical reasons. Number one, The spouse is always going to ask questions. So you go to the doctor, you do the evaluation with the doctor, and then you go home and your spouse is like, what did the doctor say? I don't know, something about this olfaction. I think that's what it, or whatever. They want to know that the answers, and it's going to make it easier just to hear it from the horse's mouth, the proverbial horse's mouth. But more importantly, and a more practical reason, is exactly kind of what you honed in on, is that they're going to be there to kind of help fill in the gaps. They're going to be there to help support them. Everything we start with in our clinic and our Brain Restore centers across the country. We start everything with, we want to get a clear picture of what's going on. And so spouse or significant other can help fill in those gaps. But number two, most importantly, what their goals are. So what is it that you're here for? And the spouse or significant other is going to play a huge role because they're involved in that process. They're going to be involved. We had a couple who just came in today. One of our patients, her mother, she's concerned with her cognitive decline. There's a history of Alzheimer's in the family. And it was very much it was a family affair. The husband was there, the daughter was there, and they were all three kind of chiming in terms of like what the goal is and what they're after and what they're seeing and their perspective and their perception. So absolutely, yeah, it's huge. That's not just important. It's essential. It's critical.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing. I remember when my father was still alive, he had been diagnosed with some medical stuff that he was dealing with from bad habits over the years, and but he was in total denial, man. Yeah. And all we had was his word on what was going on, and everything's fine. He was that the doctor said this, the doctor said that. Well, after he passed, we found the paperwork of what the doctors were actually saying, where it was written down, stuff that he kept hidden from us. And it was not at all what we thought he was dealing with, because he was giving us bad information, right?
Yep.
Business owners, I want to talk to you for a second. Do you have a retail space inside your location? If so, I want you to think about something. Your customers are buying electrolytes. You know that, right? The problem is they're not buying them from you. Well, Salt Electrolytes can help fix that with their wholesale program. They can bring these sales to you in-house so that your customers get the electrolytes they love from the company they love, you. All you have to do is head over to goearnyoursalt.com and scroll to the bottom of the page and click Apply for Wholesale. Do it now before you forget. I know your type, I'm one of you. Once again, that's goearnyoursalt.com. The link is at the bottom of the homepage. There will also be a link in the description on this video. And now, my friends, go earn your salt.
Yep, that's exactly right. So yeah, we just have a hard, fast rule. We will not even talk about care with you unless spouse or significant other is there. We're not going to go down that road. It's one of the first things we ask them is like, on a scale of 0 to 10 in terms of motivation and follow through, where you're going to be. 0 is you're not going to do anything we tell you to do. 10 is you'll do whatever it takes to reach your goals. We need to know that number. And if they say like anything less than an 8 or above, we're going to be really clear with them. This may not be the right fit for you. Because we're going to ask you to do stuff. One of the things we're going to ask you to do is bring your spouse or significant other with you on the follow-up. Like if you can't abide by that and follow that simple task, then this probably isn't going to be the right fit. And that's a real easy.
That's a big deal, man.
Yeah, it is. And it's a really easy litmus test. Like if you can't involve your spouse, we had a gentleman who came in a couple weeks ago, month ago or so, and said, we want you to bring your spouse. He's like, no, she's too busy. She's not going to want to be involved. And I'm like, then we're probably not going to be able to help you, because if we're not, it would be different if you were talking about like, I've got this like little kink in my neck and it's just a little, it's this tight muscle, it would be different with something like that. We're talking about your brain here. This is not some trivial thing. This is,
if your brain's sick, you're not even capable of evaluating things correctly.
Correct.
Time,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, not a trivial thing at all. So
you have mentioned earlier that diet and exercise are two of the biggest factors that contribute to brain health, right? And I want to explore that a little, because again, those are hard things, right? Being motivated to exercise requires a certain level of energy, and you alluded to that with the laser therapy. What else? What other things besides diet and exercise do you think are maybe the top 5? The the next three on the list.
Yeah.
What?
So what's interesting you say that is Dr. Barry, our chief clinical officer, he uses an AI tool called Consensus. It's like Google, but or ChatGPT, but specifically for peer-reviewed literature. And he's done this exercise ad nauseum. And so we know exactly, according to what the research tells us, loud and clear, what the top 5 are. We know exactly. Diet and exercise are the top 2. Those are undisputed, that the heavyweights. Number 3, low level laser therapy. Number 4, hyperbaric oxygen therapy. Number 5, neuro rehab, neurofeedback. Those are the top.
Where does sleep fall in there?
Yeah, and you know what? That's I take that back. Sleep. We're gonna lump sleep into lifestyle, exercise. Yeah, sleep is huge. You're exactly right. Lifestyle. Because we're gonna kind of lump those together. Sleep is definitely gonna be probably one of the biggest right there. So yeah, my bad on that. But yeah, huge. Sleep would be top 5 for sure. Yeah, sleep is. The main thing that they just learned. I want to say less than 10 years ago, is the glymphatic waste clearance that takes place during sleep. Not to mention all the other stuff, but basically what essentially happens during sleep is the brain does a brain detox. Your cerebrospinal fluid pumps and flushes throughout the night, and what you're doing is it's taking all of those kind of harmful end products and byproducts and waste products out of the brain and detoxifying. And if you don't get that full deep, restful, restorative sleep, your brain cannot go through that normal cleansing, detoxification cycle that is required, among other things, right? Sleep's huge for memory consolidation and long-term memory storage and all that fun stuff, and all the other things that happen in terms of rebuilding or replenishing neurotransmitters and all that other fun stuff. And but yeah, that probably one of the biggest with sleep is that glymphatic waste clearance, just clearing out waste from the brain.
I brought that up because I hear 6 months ago, I'd come off this year of dealing with double pneumonia. And I don't know if I've talked to you about that, but I got super sick January 25 and ended up with pneumonia. And it was just months and months and months of fighting that, trying to get it back, and not realizing how bad I was, how bad of condition I was in.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I realized is that for like 5 years, I had been running on, 4 hours of sleep a night, maybe 5 on a good night. But I was just busy. I was doing things and had my schedule arranged in such a way that it was late nights and early mornings back to back every day, and somewhere around last November, I started putting the puzzle pieces together. I was like, I wonder if I'm just lacking sleep, So I started to, I rearranged my schedule to where I would get, even on my low nights, I could at least get 7 hours, right?
Yeah.
And my goodness, dude, I feel like a different human.
Yeah.
Like a different human. Like all of a sudden, exercise was easier. You mentioned you got to have some energy to be able to do that kind of stuff. I spent almost a year and a half almost of really not wanting to grapple much. And I love jujitsu, but I'd get on the mats, I'd get a couple rounds in, I'd lose interest because it just wasn't fun.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But now, dude, I'll do 5, 6, 8, 10 rounds, and I'm like, this is just a good time.
Yeah.
My recovery is better. Like life is different with it.
Yeah. So, it makes a huge difference. Yeah. Yeah.
So you wrote this book. I'm gonna hold it up here and plug your book because there it is.
Awesome.
Restoring Brain Health, right? I've started reading it, and this is where most of these questions came in because I'm not all the way through. I'm really, I told you, probably an eighth of the way through the thing, but it's prompted a bunch of questions here, and that's where all this is coming from.
Sure.
It's a fascinating read, dude. I didn't know anything about your personal story, and you go through that in the intro of the book, and then you start discussing the same things that we've been discussing here so far today. One of the things in the book that I don't even remember what it was, Chad, but it got me questioning when we feel like we're doing things that are productive, okay, or like we're excelling or succeeding. How do those feelings of success and failure work into the brain health arena?
Oh boy, that's a great question. when we talk about like the psychological aspects of brain health, that's its own obviously clear window and domain. The thing that I would say is one of the more common conversations that I have with patients is I'll pose and sometimes they think that this is like a loaded question. It's not meant to be a loaded question at all. It's a very straightforward question. I pose the question, then what are feelings? Right? And they're like, well, how do you describe what feelings are? A simple question. I'll pose that to you, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but there's a really simple answer to what feelings are. What would you say feelings are?
Having never thought about it in that light, feelings are our perception of what's going on around us, right? It's just our perception of things is how I would define it.
And while that is true, the thing I would simply say, cut through the noise, is your perception reality? Yes, it is, right? So feelings really at the end of the day are physiology. So feelings are not imaginary. That's the point. The punchline is if you feel a certain way, right? And I'll prove that right now, right? Let's say that right all of a sudden right now I said something on your podcast to offend you, something deeply offending about your wife or your kids, and you were legitimately angry with me, right? Describe what would be happening with your muscles. Relaxed or tense?
Yeah, dude.
Right? So what happens with
some of it would be for sure tense.
What happens with blood pressure? Does it lower or elevate?
For sure is going to go up.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, that stress effect. That
exactly.
Anger,
So your body's going to release catecholamines, your heart rate's going to go up, right? And so the thing I would simply say is this, to point into, to kind of answer your question in kind of a roundabout way, how we feel influences our physiology, and our physiology influences how we feel. It's this kind of loop, right? And so, and the thing too is, and this goes back to that book James Clear wrote, Atomic Habits. Fantastic book. One of the things he talks about is one of the ways in which we can influence to a large degree how we feel. And you hinted at this already, is perception, right? Is this he talks about habits and this idea of identity. He says identity shapes beliefs, beliefs shape identity, and it's this infinite loop, right? And not only that, but identity influences. It's this domino effect, right? Is what you largely believe about yourself and or perceive about yourself is going to influence your beliefs. Your beliefs are going to largely dictate and determine your behaviors, right? Behaviors are going to then influence the outcome, and then outcome reinforces one way or another for positive or negative, that kind of cycle or that loop, right? And so to a large degree, I would say it starts with a sense of identity, in terms of, if you're perceiving that you're this, we see this a lot with people who get chronically ill, who are sick, or chronically dealing with some sort of a health issue. They have to break free of that identity of being a chronically sick person, a chronically ill person, because that will have a massive stranglehold on their outcomes to a large degree. There's another great book that I share with patients a lot of times called The Expectation Effect. One of the stories from that book that is just so profound is a gentleman who was super depressed. He enrolled in this new antidepressant medication study. And and this is a true story. You can read about it in the book Expectation Effect. This gentleman was super depressed this one day, and he decided, you know what? I've got this bottle of pills. I'm just going to end it today. And so he just downed his whole bottle of pills the medication that he was being studied on. And all of a sudden, a few minutes later, he realized, what have I done? Oh no, I do want to live. And so he calls 911 and he's like, I just downed a freaking bottle of pills. I want to live. Paramedics get there. By the time they get there and they get him in, he's coding. He's like heart stopped and everything. Take him to the hospital. They're trying to get to the bottom of like, okay, well, what happened? What medication did he take? They start doing some research, come to find out, long story short, spoiler alert, sugar pills. He was on the placebo.
Placebo, yeah.
And yet he legitimately coded. He legitimately had, his heart stopped. He legitimately was dying. even from taking his placebo medications. And so the punchline is most people are familiar with the placebo effect. Many people haven't heard of the nocebo effect. It's the ugly flip side, other side of the coin of the placebo effect. And so perception influences reality. Beliefs, will shape to a large degree. And so to answer kind of your question, and I don't know if I'm answering it well or not, but that's where I go when we talk about this idea of like feeling motivated or feeling a certain way. I think a lot of those feelings are going to be influenced by our core identity and sense of self. And then I think what we as human beings want to do, and I'm not a psychologist, so I'm not trying to claim, psychologists will probably have nomenclature and names and theories for all the different things, but this is just what I've seen working with people over the years and helping people with various health issues. We have an identity, and then what we will typically do is try and use various behaviors to try and reinforce or shape that identity to kind of stay in conformity, right?
I guess that is a little different than the mental health we've been talking, or the brain health you've been talking about, right?
Right.
You're now talking more psychology than you are brain health. However, that overlap is what we're kind of getting to, right?
That's exactly
they
right.
They do overlap.
Yeah, very much so. And we have these kinds of conversations. In fact, I was just having a conversation with a patient today. We see a lot of people who have overlapping anxiety, depression issues, which not surprising, right? So a lot of that is we have to have some of these kind of headspace question or conversations with them to help them kind of reframe. And I'm super for, if you've got a good counselor that you work with a mental health counselor. They'll help in that regard too, with a lot of that area and arena. And I don't claim that our program is like the program for mental health issues. We do help people who struggle with depression and anxiety. Because again, not surprisingly, how often do you think depression accompanies neurodegenerative changes and or post-concussive syndrome? It's like you're always going to get some degree of, right, depression, anxiety, all those things, when you're dealing with chronic health issues of any type. It's no wonder, so we see that a lot too. So,
yeah. Chad, what would you say would be kind of the big thing that people should look for? You mentioned this test. It was Montreal something test that you had, and they gave the score, right? And what should be the big things people should look for in their friends or family or themselves with regard to brain health?
Great question.
Declining brain health, I should say.
Yeah. I would say, it's one of those things. It's really simple. You don't need to overcomplicate it. If you're asking questions, that's probably the sign, right? This seems, we get people who I'm going to bring up a religious thing real quick and tie it back to it, right? Because it may not fit at first, but I think it will fit the analogy, because we hear this in my church. I'm a person of faith, and maybe you've had this dilemma too. Sometimes people they'll have a certain feeling or a thought that'll occur to them, and they'll want to know, was this just my own thought, or is this something God wants me to know? Is God speaking to me now, or is this just a thought on my own? And I've heard several leaders in our church who have said, what difference does it make? In the sense of like, if is it a good prompting? Is it a good thought that came to your head? Like, Riley's been struggling with pneumonia for a while now. Maybe I should bring him some soup. He's been struggling for a little bit, or maybe I should go mow his lawn. He's been pretty tired. Do you think God wants me to do that? Or do you think I should do that? Is that my thoughts? Or either way, whether it's God prompting you to do it or you prompting, is it a good thing? Is it going to help somebody? Then yeah, you should probably do it. Similarly, in a similar vein, if you're asking the question of, I wonder if mom, if this is some signs of early cognitive decline, I wonder, I don't think you need a doctor to tell you if it's concerning to you, if it seems off. It's one of those things where the worst thing that can happen in that scenario is you bring them in, they do an evaluation, and you find that, and I'm not talking MRI, CT, because we see these people all the time where they go to the doctors and everything looks fine. What you need is some sort of a functional performance evaluation, like a Montreal Cognitive Assessment, like a QEEG, like a balance assessment. Take them through MRI. They'll be largely disappointed if they go the conventional route. I wonder if my mom's dealing with a cognitive issue. They take them in and they do an MRI. No, everything looks fine. There's no
wrong
lesions.
Test, right? It's the wrong test.
That's exactly right. That's the point, right? And so if a family member or loved one is even remotely concerned or wondering, there's your answer. Yeah, get them in, do an evaluation, have them do the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, even a mini mental status examination or something simple like that can kind of start the conversation. That's my thought.
Let's switch gears, man. We're an hour and a half in, and I wanna start to bring this plane down a little bit.
Yeah.
Can we switch to some lighter questions?
Light me up with the light questions.
Light questions. All right, man. Chad, this is called the Go Earn Your Salt podcast. And when you hear that term, go earn your salt, what comes to mind?
Boy, that's a great question. We had that conversation about salt and soldiers back in the day, I think my mind immediately goes towards that kind of 1% better every day. We hear Ricky Lundell, he's always posting on Instagram, go get 1% better every day. I think earn your salt means at the end of the day, do you feel good about what you've done that day? Did you feel like you accomplished something good? Have you done some good in the world? Is the world a better place because of your being in it today? That sort of thing. I think that's where my mind goes when I hear that.
Beautiful answer, man. One of the best ones yet. I like it.
Thanks, man.
Chad, outside of your business, what is your favorite pastime?
I want to do more camping. I love being outdoors. I love spending time with my family. I love, you said one favorite, but I'm going to give you a bunch of favorites if that's cool.
Go for it.
My favorite thing that I've been doing as of late, and I get to do it tomorrow, is what I call Perfect Saturday, where I get to go to the gym early in the morning, and I put on whatever long show that I want to watch on Netflix or whatever, and I go run on the treadmill, and I just go nice and slow for typically 4 miles or whatever, 5 miles. Not because I'm an amazing runner. I'm not. I'm a horrible runner. I'm trying to increase my VO2 max slowly over time. It's a slow process.
Did you know you can run outside? Did you know that's a thing?
I do, but I can't watch the show that I want to watch. Like that's my lazy indulgence.
Oh man. Okay.
But I do need to run outside more. But then I'll typically sauna, and then I'll take a cold shower, and then I'll be feeling amazing for the day. And then I'll typically, if I can, get to my clinic and do hyperbaric oxygen therapy, and feel super productive and just feel good. And then spend time with the family the rest of the day. That's what I call Perfect Saturday. So
Perfect Saturday. I like it. I like it.
So
yeah, man, you talk about running 4 miles on a treadmill. That would give me some mental health issues right there.
Yeah, I get it. It's the
I'll go run 4 miles, but I want to do it in the foothills, man.
Yeah, no, I like that too. Yeah. Now that weather's getting better, I do need to get more outside for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
what is your favorite band?
Jimmy Eat World.
Cow, never even heard of it.
Favorite song is 23 by Jimmy Eat World. I can say that quickly.
Jimmy Eat World.
Jimmy Eat World, amazing band. They've been around since the 90s. They're like one of the OG like emo rock bands. They're awesome. Love Jimmy Eat World.
I'm gonna have to check it out.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to check it out. What's something quirky about you that people don't know?
Quirky about me. I hold a Guinness Book of World Records record. I'm a Guinness Book of record holder, and I can show you my certificate.
Shoot.
I'll show you. Hang
What?
tight.
Yeah, show it.
Yeah.
Bring it. Is this like held a blue belt longer than anyone else?
Yeah. Oh, you throwing me under the bus there, buddy. That's bad. That's a low blow. I was a participant in the world's largest bubble soccer game held on the Boise State football field back in 2000. September 15th, 2017. My buddy Russell Brunson, you know Russell,
I
ClickFunnels.
know him. Yeah, I know of him. Yeah.
Yeah, so he invited me to come
He
and
did the foreword in your book,
join.
didn't he?
He did. Yeah. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, yes, it's right there on top. Look at that, right
yeah,
there.
forward by Russell Brunson. Yeah. Um, so he invited me to be a participant, and I got a Guinness record. I am a Guinness record holder. So there you go. There's something quirky about me. So
Dude, you're the first Guinness record holder
Guinness
I've ever
record holder.
met
I wish the record was
that
a
I
little bit
know
more.
of.
Yeah, I wish the record was a little bit more impressive, but it's still fun to say that I
Well, there was
hold
the
a
dude that ate
Guinness
the
record.
Cessna. Did you see that?
The Cessna?
He ate an airplane, dude. He'd one little bite at a time, and yeah, you could just eat a bigger airplane.
Wow, that is, I think, the
I mean,
craziest thing I've heard in a long time.
yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, if you want to set a cool record, I
I
guess. I
guess.
don't know if
Yeah,
it's even cool, but
ate a
ugh.
Cessna. Wowzers.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Your favorite food?
Oh, favorite food, man. I could do just about any type of Asian food. I love good Thai food. I love good Vietnamese food. I will say, quick shout out for locals. I went to that Kachi Sicilian, if I'm pronouncing it right, the CACI down there on State Street. They had the best lasagna the other night. I went there first time. Best lasagna, so good. But
Really?
in general, love good Asian food, Vietnamese and Thai food, phenomenal.
That's where's the best place to get Thai food here in Boise? Or the Boise area, I want to say.
Yeah, Thai basil, hands down,
Thai
on the
basil.
corner of Fairview and Eagle. They have a sister
Yeah.
company, same one, Pad Thai House, both phenomenal, just excellent Thai food. Yeah,
Yep. They I would concur. Those are both very good. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Chad, what was the scariest moment of your life?
Oh gosh, scariest moment of my life was when I almost died. I almost drowned. I was in chiropractic college. Long story short, stupid dare. I swam in this bay in my clothes for $30. I thought $30 was worth it because it would have bought me dinner because I was a poor college student. And I almost drowned. It was scary. It was really, really horrific and almost died.
Was it Riptide situation? What was going on?
No, it was like I suck at swimming. It was, I overestimated my swimming capabilities and got too far out and just, man, it was just frightening. I had this irrational thought that occurred to me, I guess not totally irrational, that there were sharks in the bay. And I was like, there's sharks in the ocean. Bays connect to oceans. Sharks come into bays all the time. There's sharks in here. And so I started panicking and freaking out, and that just burned me out. And then I was treading water for my life. And then, yeah, I started sinking, and it was like miraculously this father and son were on a kayak, and I didn't even see them. And they were right next to me, and they pulled me out, and it was crazy experience. That was probably the scariest.
That's kind of wild, man, because that's back to what we were talking about earlier, right? With the feelings of success or failure and how they interact with brain health, and
yeah.
that at that moment, it wasn't exactly irrational that you were thinking there were sharks in there, because there very possibly could have been.
Yeah.
But there was no indication there was, and there was no imminent threat.
Right.
Except in your head.
Yeah. And it completely changed my physiology. Yeah.
So you said, how did you word it? You said feelings are based on reality because they affect our physiology, but they're only based on it. They don't actually dictate what is real, right?
Totally. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah.
That's an interesting tie together there. Chad, what's the best advice you've ever received?
Oh man. Best, that's such a good question. I'm sure there are multiple answers. I love that Stoic saying, "This too shall pass." I think that has served me very well over the past few years. I've been through some really difficult challenges, and I find that the best way through any sort of difficult situation and good situations too, to stay grounded, to stay present, to know that things pass, good or bad. And I think it's such a beautiful way to think and to live. in terms of advice is just to always remember, like, moments are fleeting, right? Be as present as you can. This too shall pass, good or bad.
It's funny, man, because I've mentioned that on this podcast before.
Yeah.
That exact phrase.
Yeah.
I felt like that with going through that pneumonia was that way for me. It was just like I started to wonder if it was the new normal, if maybe I'd done permanent damage to my lungs, if it would never come back. But it was like it'll pass or it won't. And in that situation, that if I did damage, it's been done, and I got to learn how to live with it. If not, then we'll progress over time. And here's the thing that I can do to help that possibly. But in turn, what would be some advice you would give out?
I would say the advice that I tend to give practitioners and entrepreneurs and just people who are trying to accomplish good and great things in their lives. The thing that I have learned in my life is that the margin of error is often far greater than people think it is. And so let that bolster that thought or feeling inside of you of wanting to take action on something. A good friend of mine, he had a saying that he always tried to live his life by that I just love too, that kind of fits with this, is he says, anytime he's scared to make a decision, he would always pose the question to himself, the rhetorical, if not me, who? If not now, when? And I love that thought and that idea of just taking action, because 9 times out of 10, the vast majority of the time, when you go and look back on your life, as cliche as it might sound, you're not going to look back on the adventurous decisions that you made. You're going to look back on the far more with regret of the things you didn't do versus the things you did do in terms of actions and risks that are taken.
Yeah, that's true. That's so true, dude. Good stuff. Chad, what is an item on your bucket list? Something you want to do before you cash it all in?
My wife and I are doing this next year. At least this is the tentative plan. We're going to be celebrating our 25th wedding anniversary. We just saw this thing that you can do where you go to England and you can hire these companies that will go, it's basically a 100-mile walk, where you break it up into like chunks of like 14 miles a day. You walk through like the hills of kind of the rural England. It's like from like Oxford area, I think, all the way down to like Bath, England. And every day you stop at a new like bed and breakfast or whatever, and then you have a company that will take all your luggage and take it to the next place for you. And so all you have to do is get your day pack and walk, and you get to enjoy time. And so I'm like, to me, there is nothing that I would want to do more with my wife than just be with her for the day, and just every day, just a new adventure, see new areas. Her and I get to talk and hang out, and we're like, that is what we're going to do. So that's the plan for our 25th wedding anniversary. Looks fun.
That's really cool. I've never heard of that sort of a thing, but Dan Goggins from our jiu-jitsu school, right? He does a lot of that 200-mile, 300-mile hikes, and they camps with his family, and they just camp their way through that sort of thing.
Amazing.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
What is your favorite book of all time besides Restoring Brain Health by Dr. Chad Woolner?
I would say probably most profound effect for me book that I've read is Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. Love that book.
It's called Obstacle is the Way?
Yeah, The Obstacle is the Way. One of the best books ever. It's like, should be required reading for high school students. It's so good.
What's give us kind of a summary of it.
Very grounded in Stoic philosophy and Stoicism. The idea of people shifting their perception and perspective on trials and difficulties in life, and shifting the perception of these things as, why did this happen to me, to what can I learn from this experience? And it's in that shift that real growth occurs. Like the reality of our existence is that trials are inevitable, but the suffering attached to those things, or the perception of suffering, is voluntary. You can choose to either suffer or learn through those things. And depending upon how you choose to perceive, we talked about perception and feelings, how we choose to perceive those things will determine to a large degree the outcomes that we experience from those things. It goes kind of hand in hand with Viktor Frankl in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, right? You have two people going through literally the exact same experience, two completely different outcomes, and what determined the outcomes was the perception of the experience. So.
Oh, that is interesting. I interviewed a guy last week, and that was the book he cited was
Man's Search for Meaning. Yeah, it's a great book.
Yeah,
great book.
Yeah, that's a fascinating concept, man, and it's something I think we all kind of inherently understand, but sometimes don't want to admit, especially if we're on the victim side of that, right?
Yeah.
It's
for sure.
What's the next challenge for you, man? Where are you going from here?
The goal for us is to grow Brain Restore Centers. We're 25 clinics strong across the country, and the goal is to get to 100 clinics and continue on from there. But that's kind of the next big hurdle for me in my mind's eye, is we want to bring this to as many people as possible across the world and across the country. And so the next big kind of benchmark for me that we're putting into is 100 clinics. And then, of course, my clinic here locally, helping more people here in our community as well. So
that's fantastic, dude. Chad, where can you be found? What's your social media?
If you go to brainrestorecenters.com is our main URL for our company. Me personally, Dr. Chad Woolner, at Dr. Chad Woolner on Instagram. Trying to think what else. Yeah, Facebook, Chad Woolner, Dr. Chad Woolner. Yeah, pretty easy to be found.
Cool, man. We'll stick all that in the description. So if you need Dr. Chad's services, you can find it. Dude, this was an honor to have you on, man. I know it's been a little bit of a long time coming here, and we try to line schedules up and that sort of a thing. But it's been a pleasure. It's been very informative, and I'm really excited you came on.
Likewise, brother. Appreciate you.
All right, man. As always, Dr. Chad, go earn your salt, my friend. Hey, you've just finished up this episode, and I want to know, are you or someone you know a getting after it, go earn your salt type of person? If so, message me directly on Instagram at the Go Earn Your Salt podcast, and perhaps we can have you on the show. Also, if you like this content, leave us a review, subscribe, and share with your friends. And perhaps this podcast can help you and them go earn your salt.